Right, okay. Tonight's podcast is all about Dennis Lehane's fabulous novel, Shutter Island. Now, I only finished reading this a couple of days ago, and I have to say that I was really dubious about whether it was going to be worth a read, because I'm not a big fan of thrillers, to be honest. But there is something about this story that really hooked me in, and made me interested to read it before you'd even read it. You'd already said to me when you picked it up from the library what it was about, and there was an inkling in my head that I would quite enjoy this, which is strange because normally that doesn't happen.
Well, the only reason I picked it up in the first place is because I found out that the film was going to be made, directed by Martin Scorsese, and you always think, well, if Martin Scorsese thinks it's worth turning into a film, there must be some sort of substance to the story. So I took it out and I read it, and it's a very quick read. It's not very long, and it moves along very, very quickly, and the chapters are very short. And it's at first it makes you think that it's just going to be your bog standard thriller, but it has many more hidden depths to it and many more storylines than some thrillers have.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you say that, and obviously that is true of this book, because when we initially discussed it after I finished reading it, you hadn't picked up on some of the storylines that I had picked up on, whereas I hadn't even tried to decode the puzzles within the book,
Yeah.
which obviously add an extra layer to the story if you do that whilst you're reading it, and help give a greater context to later on revealings.
I suppose it depends on how many types of book in that genre that you've read. I suppose because I read a lot of crime fiction, I know that normally within these stories the author gives the reader enough leeway in order to work it out on their own. It just depends on whether they can pick up the clues or not. So when I was presented with these codes, I thought it was a fantastic opportunity for me to try and work it out, maybe even ahead of the characters in the story. And I found it quite fun, and it added another element to the story, being able to work it out, getting a piece of paper, trying to work it out as you went along.
And I think the story itself, without the codes, if they hadn't given you the clues, because like I said, I didn't try and work it out, I didn't try and sit there and go, well, what does this mean, what does that mean? Without that being given to you, the book is still fantastic. It's still got a lot going for it, and like you said before, if Scorsese's turning it into a film, you just know that it's got to have that core storytelling in the middle of it. And Dennis Lehane is obviously a writer who has that drive and also that narrative that can move things forward quickly and sharply at the same time as giving you a lot of stuff to think about. I mean, when I say that, you think, well, if it's moving forward quickly, there may not be a whole lot of substance there. But what he does is he outlines things for you and lets your imagination build it up. For me, the island that they're stuck on, Shutter Island, it's not greatly described. In fact, I think there's about 4 or 5 different explanations on what it looks like from 4 or 5 different characters. But because you get that brief outline at the very beginning in the prologue, I already had like a percentage of it built. And then when the main character arrives, I get a bit more. And then as people reveal more and more about the island, it's like my ideas are built up. So he doesn't go in and describe everything. He gives you little bits and lets you use your imagination. I think that in this day and age, that's something that you don't get very often anymore.
No. I mean, we should probably explain what the plot of the story is at this point.
Yes.
It involves two FBI.
Well, what happened? Yeah, there's these 2 U.S. marshals who go to this island where there is a mental facility, a mental health facility. It's on an island that is virtually uninhabitable, and is very hard to get to, just off of the coast of Boston.
The reason they've gone
They've
there
gone
is to
there
investigate the
the disappearance of a female inmate
Yes. Who shouldn't have gone
who
missing.
shouldn't have gone missing. In fact, it would have been impossible for her to escape, technically. But as you go into the story, it becomes obvious that not everything is as it seems.
No, she leaves various clues along the way that
Yes.
Teddy, the main character, has to solve, and so does the reader, and it opens other theories up as to who people are and their purpose on the island.
What their real motives are.
Yes, and this story does have, whether it's intentional or not, it seems to have had an influence on quite a lot of things that have come after it. I felt huge comparisons between the novel and the television series Lost, particularly the idea about there being areas on the island that you have to somehow get to, and then trying to work out the purpose of that building being there when you reach it. Also the whole idea about people living on the island that are not known to the other characters. There's elements of survival in it. There's elements of and there's the whole scientific nature of it as well, which is something that Lost has kind of taken and run with.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Lost, because I felt that there was, I mean, this is something that I don't know if Dennis Lehane plays video games or computer games, but did you not get the feeling at some point that this was like one of the missed islands?
Yes. Yeah.
Because it felt so barren, even though, because for me the hospital itself is alive with people. The lighthouse, to me, although later on you find it's occupied by a lot of people, and Ward A is occupied by a lot of people, it feels, because the fact that the boat only arrives once a week, it's a desolate place, nobody lives there, and there's a storm going on, that things aren't as they seem, A, because no one goes outside, and B, because of the fact that it's just a weird place.
I mean, to the outside eye, it's an island that looks completely, as you say, barren, isolated, but it's
deserted, even.
Yes.
Being a former military post.
It's full of people.
Yeah.
Full of people that no one ever sees. And it's very interesting to explore that as Teddy becomes more involved with the characters of the island, and the sense of loneliness that he has, particularly towards the second half of the book, and the way that he deals with that when he's amongst so many people.
Yeah.
I suppose the other element of it is that because these people have obviously been put there for a reason, he doesn't want to attach himself specifically to those people, because he maybe sees them as untrustworthy or dangerous, or just people that he wouldn't want to mix with, and he has to deal with a lot of taboos and his own personal issues towards those people in order to survive on the island.
And I think it's very interesting that you bring that up. I mean, I'd have brought that up later, because I see a direct correlation between his views of what is really going on and how he feels about the other people with what becomes the reality at the end.
Yes.
Because to me, this book is a great example of the way that it's a metaphor basically for psychology for the 60s, 70s up to today. Is, do you medicate a problem, or do you try to work through a problem?
Yes.
And that's the whole point of this book. And at the end, it seems like you are coming out of a trance. And my point about the prejudices that he has is that he doesn't for 1 second think that he is the most dangerous person on the island. But throughout the book, you get this slow